Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Ron Hammond of the Blockchain Association, and we're going to talk all things crypto regulations and the big updates in DC around crypto. Ron, great to have you on this Friday morning.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. There's a lot going on for sure.
Oh, yeah, Ron, I don't even know where to start because there's so many things. It seems there's a lot of actions and just talks and confusion. My head is spinning after this crazy week. But let's start with, we had some hearings this week which touched on crypto. Tell us about these hearings and what were some of the takeaways?
Yeah, sure thing. So there were a lot of hearings when it comes to crypto this week. Some were tangentially related, like Jerome Powell from the Fed coming into both the House Financial Services Committee and Senate Banking Committee, where CBDCs and crypto was mentioned several times. We also had the Energy and Public Works Committee having Environment and Public Works Committee having a hearing on crypto mining specifically. So that was a major one. And then we also had the House Financial Services Committee having a hearing on the regulation by enforcement approach by the SEC and the other folks in the administration. And then finally, we had CFTC Chair Benham in front of the Senate Ag Committee. So it was quite a hefty week when it comes to hearings, and there was a lot to be covered here. Happy to expand more, but it was a lot more to come. I think we're seeing Congress right now at least form together. We had a little drama, as you all probably saw, with the speaker race, and that kind of delayed a little bit of the actions when it came to hearings and legislation and such. But now that Congress is formed, now that the committees are formed, now that we have a speaker, we are seeing this all kind of percolate in terms of hearings, which will lead to legislation, and then legislation hopefully will lead to action. So we're just getting started in this Congress, but it's going pretty aggressive. And one thing to say for certain, Congress really cares about crypto this year.
Yeah. Maybe we can touch on Rustin Benham and the CFTC, because he did state that he believes Ethereum and stable coins and so forth are commodities. Yet yesterday you had a lawsuit from the New York, I think, Attorney General against Kucoin Exchange. And in that lawsuit, they named ETH as a security. And I'm like, look at this is just wild. This is mass confusion here.
And that's the funny part is that, we've had SC Chair Gensler say, this is very clear. And I think what you just outlined here, it shows that a lot of folks in the industry are wondering, this is not clear at all. What do you mean it's clear? We had the CFTC, to your point, saying that he believes that most of these are commodities, and that in particularly Ethereum is a commodity, and that does build off the Hinman speech from several years ago from the SEC. But then at the same time, we are seeing these enforcement actions, which do have very heavy implications. But they also say that various tokens are securities. We've seen this before. Take the Coinbase insider trading case, where we had, I believe it was 9 tokens deemed securities. And again, this wasn't the meat of the actual enforcement action or lawsuit in this case, at least for the Coinbase one a couple months ago. But using that enforcement action, they were able to list other tokens as securities and not provide comment from the industry or not have any way for folks to engage. And so that's when we're talking about regulation by enforcement. There's 2 prongs. They're going after certain companies, but at the same time, they're also trying to achieve policy objectives via these enforcement actions. And the public really has no way to involve themselves, or at least to interact. And so that's really concerning from our perspective. And it is not clear for a lot of folks saying it is, at least at the SEC and other regulators. It's very, very apparent that folks in the industry just do not know where the regulators are. And again, they don't themselves, candidly, too. I'm not sure they understand exactly where they all are either. So whether it be stable coins, Ethereum, there's a lot of mixed signals we're getting as an industry. And this isn't helping no one, especially folks who are on the ground and building here. They're saying, why do I want to put up with this when I know I can go to UK, to Singapore, to Paris, or where have you, when I know there's actually rules in the books, and I don't have to worry about a lawsuit one day potentially looping in my token or potentially changing the course of what folks deem my token to be a commodity or security. And so that's no way to run an industry. And unfortunately, this is what we're dealing with here in the United States.
So, Ron, I don't know if you can answer this question, because it is a difficult one, because we can't read people's minds. But is this a move to slow crypto down or to kill crypto? Because it seems like you still have these bigger incumbent players like your BlackRock, your BNY Mellon, and so forth, who took a position last year despite all the things that happened. But then you have these enforcement actions coming, and there's not an outright ban of crypto, but it's like just I guess Operation Choke Point, as they're calling it.
Yeah, I mean, at least we found out yesterday in this hearing, or it was said by one of the witnesses in the financial services hearing that was focusing on the administration's approach to crypto regulation, and a lot of it being critical from both sides of the aisle. We saw Republicans and Democrats being very critical of the administration's approach, not just the SEC, but to your point, we have the banking regulators who have been discouraging banks in particular to interact with crypto companies, to bank crypto companies, to issue stablecoins, and a plethora of other activities in the digital asset space. And it was actually pretty interesting because Jerome Powell in the House hearing said, I thought the statement was actually pretty middle of the road. I thought we were able to say there's innovation here, but at the same time, be careful of the risk. But at least from our perspective, we saw that statement as incredibly negative. I didn't see too many positive, if any, positive statements there. And that's a real concern. We're seeing, especially with the recent drama with Silvergate, Silicon Valley Bank, and others, there's a lot of concern about crypto companies just getting access to the banking system. And for many, they're just trying to make payroll. They're trying to keep their operations running. And now we're seeing this idea of debanking innovators and saying, you shouldn't have access to even just a bank account to pay your employees. And that's incredibly concerning. And I think this is the approach to your point, to slow down the industry. And I think the last thing to highlight here to show that there is this evidence of sorts to slow it down is the SEC custody rule, where they are telling registered investment advisors, folks who are investing in the space, that if they want to invest, they need to go through a qualified custodian. There aren't that many left. It's Coinbase, Anchorage, BitGo, and a few other smaller players. But then at the same time, they're saying, we believe actually you have to have additional rules and recommendations to be considered safe and sound as a qualified custodian. And for many times, for custody, it's a very difficult thing to do. You have to build technical capabilities. It takes time to be able to hold each individual token. They do require different technicalities. But if you're a registered investment advisor, if you're investing in these projects or you're trying to build out these ecosystems, you're not allowed to self-custody because you're not a qualified custodian. You have to go to Coinbase and Anchorage, and that takes time to build out those capabilities. And so therefore you're stuck. You can't take them yourself. You can't invest in this space, and you have to wait for Anchorage or what have you to build these systems out. So you are paused. And this has been another really concerning move recently. Now, thankfully, I will give the SEC credit. This is actually a notice for proposed rulemaking. So they're going to listen to the industry to provide some comments. But at the same time, a lot of folks we're talking to in the industry are really concerned about this. And they say that this rule will really freeze the industry. And again, to our point, why would you put up with this? Why don't you just go elsewhere? We know the rules. We know what we can and can't do. Because the United States is a team that's just changing the goalposts every single day.
And is this, Ron, to not get too much into politics, because we do see bipartisan support for crypto, both sides of the aisles have been working together. But is this a Biden administration pushback or a legacy incumbent banking pushback? Because you mentioned like the Fed and maybe Janet Yellen's involved with the Treasury and so forth. It's not so much politics, but maybe even if a Republican was in office, we would get a similar pushback.
Yeah, I think that it depends. We're seeing, there's some regulators to take Chair Benham from the CFTC, who is a Democrat, but he has been, his approach from his agency has been a lot more welcoming for the industry. And a lot of times when folks come in, they say, we'll work with you. We'll make sure we can find a framework that fits your business model or whatever line of business you're in. At the same time, we have the SEC who says the rules are very, very clear, but it conflicts with the CFTC, and they're using everything from enforcement actions to proposed rules making to guidance that are really hampering the industry. And so I wouldn't say this again as a political angle here or the incumbent players, because to your point, we've also seen some incumbent players like Fidelity and stuff really get into this space and go all in. But at the same time, it's very unfortunate to see the legacy players now kind of dancing around the idea that we shouldn't be banking crypto and the idea that we shouldn't be able to custody crypto. And let's be honest too, if you're go back to the custody rule for a hot second, would you actually want to custody your assets at a bank? And then those guys take decades sometimes to build out these systems. They run on some very old systems sometimes. And so the idea that they could hold digital assets as a custodian is really tough, and it's going to take quite some time to build out. And so at the same point, why would you put up with this? And why would you dealing with this? And I've never seen, at least from our side, from talking to several industry folks, just the relentless, aggressive push we're seeing from the administration. Again, it's not just the Democrats or it's not the Republicans. I think it's just certain individuals, and FTX really emboldened them. And now they're running pretty aggressive, and it's really hard to stop them.
On the note of the banking with Silvergate Bank, one of those folks you mentioned is like Elizabeth Warren, and she was doing a bit of a victory lap, even though one could argue she contributed to the bank run. And Silvergate, I think people are almost looking, oh, it's a crypto issue that caused it, but more of a fractional reserve banking issue. Yes, Silvergate took losses with the crypto industry last year. What are you hearing about that dynamic with Elizabeth Warren?
Well, we're getting a lot of folks in Congress who are supporters of crypto. I will say the skeptics are also getting some supporters as well. We've seen Republicans be joining Elizabeth Warren's efforts, Roger Marshall, as well as Senator Kennedy from Louisiana. So, like I said, it's a bipartisan issue to like crypto. It's also a bipartisan issue to be a skeptic. And so, at least from our perspective here, from the Silvergate situation, it was really sad to see Senator Brown, for example, who chairs Senate Banking, pretty much dancing on the grave of Silvergate moments after the announcement was made that they were going to unwind a lot of their balance sheets and such. And so that's unfortunate. Folks are going to be harmed, and a lot of folks in the industry know that there's not that many folks you can go to in the banking side of things. And for many, Silvergate was that lifeline. So when that goes away, the number of folks we have to go for banking is very, very small. And at the same time, under a lot of scrutiny, and it seems like there's more drama playing out by the hour at this point. So with Silicon Valley Bank, for example. So we'll see how this happens. But unfortunately, it seems that this is going to be continuing. I think there's going to be some more letters from Elizabeth Warren, whether it be on Silicon Valley Bank or Signature or others. I think there's going to be a more of aggressive push because they see this win for them and saying, you know what, I think we can try to do this again and or claim credit or claim victory if another one of these folks goes down. And I think it's really sad to see the situation unfold, because I think it's for a lot of folks in the innovating space, they're just seeing more bad news, and they're saying, why do you want to stay here? I keep harping this, but I've never seen it this bad, at least from folks in the industry who are just disheartened. We're making a lot of great progress, but FTX, we're seeing all this now culminate into all these actions, and whether it be the markets or on the regulatory side, it's really sad to see.
So, Ron, hard question for you. We're we're in the middle of this, right? It's not ending anytime soon. How do you see this playing out maybe towards the end of the year? Is it we're going to see companies say, hey, we are making the decision to leave the United States, or we have to shut our doors? Are you anticipating those type of scenarios?
I think we'll see some more folks, whether it be the contagion effect in the markets or the fallout from the banks going under. I think we'll see, unfortunately, a little bit more of some pain in the industry. And to your point, it looks like we're in the middle of this storm. It's not looking like it's the light at the end of the tunnel just yet. But I do want to provide some positive news here. I think we're going to see some movement in terms of legislation. Yesterday, actually, in the financial services hearing, they attached bills to that hearing. And that's really important because those bills then usually, if they get attached to a hearing, they'll be voted on in the committee, usually in the next month or two. And that means it can go up to the House floor and start the process of trying to get signed to law. But of course, it's got to pass the Senate as well. But we're seeing the incremental first steps happening. And there's a wide array of bills. They're touching the self-custody, for example. They're touching banking, stable coins. And so we're seeing that groundswell happen, and it's bipartisan, which has been fantastic. And it's a lot of bipartisan support. So take, for example, Patrick McHenry, who introduced a fix to the broker definition from the infrastructure bill. That issue might be coming up in a couple of weeks. Yeah, there's been rumors that the Treasury Department is going to make some announcements as to what they believe who fits to that broker definition. But we see 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats joining Patrick McHenry saying, we believe that this should not cover miners, DeFi, and other parts of the industry. Folks like Coinbase and centralized exchanges, that makes sense, but we don't think it should apply to decentralized exchanges. And that's really good to see. I think it's also sending a message to the Treasury Department that there's a significant bipartisan pushback if you try to go the other direction. We do not know which way they'll go, but the good news is that we're having a political stopgap in Congress. And Congress is also, to the point of all these hearings this week, they're reasserting their role. They're saying the regulators are running amok here. Some, action we support, some we don't. But you know what? At the end of the day, Congress holds the purse strings. Congress conducts oversight, and we want to be more involved in this. And I think that's a positive thing. So I do think there's going to be some positive developments. It's just a little tough this week.
For sure. Now, there was also a proposal put out by the Biden administration to potentially tax Bitcoin mining. It seems like they're trying to get their pound of flesh anywhere they can. I know it's just a proposal, but what do you think? Do you think that has a chance to get pushed through?
So the president budget usually is more of a messaging signal. It's just the wish list that the administration has to Congress. Congress still holds the purse strings, and so they're the ones who get to decide what's in, what's out. And even if it's the same party, let's say the Democrats all control Congress, for example, and Biden administration puts out these proposals, even half of those probably won't be accepted just because there's different priorities in Congress. And so we're seeing miners, especially, like, point to the hearing that happened on Tuesday. They're getting crushed a little bit right now in DC. But I think at the same time, that proposal probably will not be advancing anytime soon. The good news is that we do have champions on crypto mining in particular. And there's a lot of folks also in Congress really haven't dived into it too much. And so I think Congress is going to hold more hearings on crypto mining. I will say, there's a lot of folks more on the Democrat and progressive side who are concerned about the energy usage. We saw that play out very well. But there is still not that much excitement or engagement on this issue, whether it be pro or con. And that could be best described in the hearing when they had, I think it's over a dozen members are a part of that committee in the Senate, and only 4 showed up. And I think there's a lot going on in the Senate. They have a lot of priorities, but I think that shows that it's a little lower on the list. I wouldn't be too concerned right now. But the last thing I will say is that when you put something in writing, at least in policy, and even if it's just a proposal, it sticks. That's going to keep coming back in some way, shape, or form. So it might not be adopted, this year or next year, but it's going to keep coming back in these proposals. And it takes only one Congress to move it forward. And so it's really important to understand that there will be a threat down the road. But right now, I'm not too concerned.
And I know many folks were not, or they were skeptical that maybe anything would happen this year as far as crypto legislation. And but do you think with this increased enforcement, maybe the chances have increased because there's going to be a lot of pain? There's probably going to be a lot of people trying to get the attention of Congress to act. Do you think our chances have improved, even though it's dire circumstances right now?
Actually, I do think so. And I think there's 2 examples that happened this week that are really important. And they're not crypto related. It's related to ESG as well as to the DC crime bill. These are 2 issues where the Senate Democrats took a position and a couple of their folks flipped over to the Republican side. And even in the DC crime bill, for example, Joe Biden said he wouldn't veto it. And so we're seeing the situation where the Democrats are starting to split a little bit. And this provides an opening because this, it's a very slim margin in the Senate. So you get 1 or 2 of those folks on the Democrat side to join the Republicans, and you get the Republicans in lockstep, then you can block a lot of legislation, you can kill legislation, you can move things forward as well. And I think, for folks in the industry, the Senate is a really important thing. We have the House has got a lot of great folks on both sides of the aisle, but the Senate's been a lot tougher. It's an older crowd. We know crypto is not, partisan. It's more generational when it comes to differences. But we have folks like Senator Gillibrand from New York who have been vocally against SEC Chair Gensler's approach. We have Cory Booker and several others as well. But if those folks join, let's say, for some legislation or at least some oversight of the SEC and other agencies, that can be a real threat. And we are seeing that now culminate into actual real changes in DC that many folks were shocked by. And so the Senate is going to be a really key player. And I think we're seeing some wins or at least some differences that folks didn't really see coming this week. And that's why I'm optimistic. I think that the Senate's going to be a really important player for the next 2 years, especially given the split.
So on that note of the SEC, I've talked to Representative Huizenga last year, Tom Emmer, and so forth. And, they mentioned they will start to try to bring him in to have some level of accountability. Are you hearing anything of when that may take place?
I'm not, but I'm seeing also a situation where we're seeing a lot of these hearings kind of building a narrative. So, for example, Financial Services Committee, they haven't had Gary Gensler in front of their committee in over a year and a half. And a lot of folks like Chair Huizinga for the Oversight Subcommittee, they're chomping at the bit. They really want to have him, as well as the CFPB and other regulators, in front of them because they haven't had that opportunity in quite some time. And the hearings this week, we also had the inspector generals from the SEC, Treasury, and the CFPB testifying in front of that Financial Services Committee. And I think we're laying the groundwork for, dear industry, what are you experiencing with the SEC? Dear industry, what are you experiencing with the CFPB? Some folks are praising it, some folks are being very critical of it, and I think it's laying the groundwork for what eventually will be the big hearing, the blockbuster hearing of Gary Gensler in front of House Financial Services, or Rohit Chopra in front of House Financial Services. The Senate Banking, they may not be as compelled to have those oversight hearings as much because, again, why would you attack your own party? It's oversight's important, but that's a political thing. But the Republicans, as well on the political side, they want to go after the administration in any way they can. And I think this is going to be pretty soon, actually. We'll have SEC Chair Gensler, probably a month or two, maybe, or 3, but it should be pretty soon.
And yesterday I saw a tweet from you where Gary Gensler put out an op-ed and you had some thoughts to share there. And, there's folks saying he's operating like a politician versus a regulator. Can you elaborate on your thoughts that you tweeted out?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that it's pretty rare for a regulator to do that for a hearing that, while they were the focus for a lot of the enforcement actions and such, as I point out today, there's a lot of other regulators who are underneath scrutiny from the crypto industry, as well as Congress. So it was a pretty odd move to have a op-ed published on crypto and his approach literally an hour right before the hearing. And I think that was more to take the narrative away from the House Republicans. I don't think it really worked because I don't think folks had time to read it before the hearing. But he was trying to, put the narrative out there. This is where my approach is, and I think we saw in that hearing there's bipartisan pushback to what his approach has been, and he's running out of friends, at least on the Democrat side of the aisle. And I think that's important to highlight. Is when the Democrats in a soon-to-be presidential election year in 2024, when they're calling out their own party, they have to be really miffed to the edge to go public about that. It's one thing to have private thoughts, or it's one thing to quietly say things to your colleagues, but to go put someone on blast publicly, that takes a lot of courage, but also takes a lot of guts. And you must be in a pretty bad situation to say that about your own party. So, and we're seeing that more and more as each week goes by. And I think that's going to be telling for how he's going to be received when he comes to Congress to testify.
Final question here. There are 2 lawsuits and cases in play right now, which could have huge impact across the industry. One, the Grayscale lawsuit against the SEC, and they just had their oral arguments this week. Folks are saying it seems like Grayscale could win this, and which would open up a Bitcoin spot ETF. Second, the Ripple lawsuit, which seems like it may wrap up soon. Are industry players paying attention to these 2 things? Do they feel the same way that these could have huge impacts and could maybe swing the power back to the industry a bit?
I think so, but we're also seeing the SEC trying to counter that narrative, and you'll see Gary Gensler. He's been saying this very aggressively. The SEC has not lost a case in the crypto industry so far, and there've been settlements like the Kraken settlement where they neither admitted or denied fault of the staking as a service as a security. But the SEC, which is true, has not lost yet in this space. And I think he's trying to tell that to other folks in the industry, saying, look, if you disagree with my enforcement actions, you're more than welcome to try to sue the SEC, but you're not going to win, or you likely won't win. So the Grayscale was really exciting to see a lot of folks publicly say, hey, look, I think it's swinging more into their favor now. But again, these court cases do go through ups and downs. And I will caveat and say, if you think Congress takes a long time to do legislation or move the ball forward, the courts are even harder, and those are way harder to track in terms of predictability. There's a lot of factors that go into it, whereas Congress is a lot more of an open process. We'll have amendments, we'll have bills, you can see things coming down the pipeline. And so that transparency with Congress and that engagement is really important. So I caution folks who think the courts are going to solve everything, because there's going to be subsequent cases after Ripple's finalized. I believe that they're going to probably have an appeal process, whoever wins or loses. And that's going to take more time. And so I think clarity is going to come through Congress, not the courts, because the courts take quite some time and effort.
Boy, I hope the US can get it right, because what they're doing right now is really crazy. And I'm seeing other countries on the flip side embracing the technology, and governments forming funds for the Web3 initiatives and so forth. And it's like here, it's a war raging between these government folks and traditional folks, traditional finance versus crypto.
Yeah, and to that last point, I'll say, we saw this with the chip manufacturers. We saw that a lot of them domiciled over in Taiwan, and then there was a recognition from the Biden administration who said, this is a critical industry. We need to have this actually onshore, and more in regards to China. And that's been, as I said, a dominant theme for Congress this year is China. And we're telling folks, look, it's a lot easier to keep these folks here when they're here now, rather than trying to reel them back in years later when you realize this is a critical industry, whether it be for payments or for tech, or what have you in the crypto space. There's a lot of elements here, and it's important that that is here in the United States, especially things like stable coins and the US dollar. There's a lot of monetary and macro implications here. And we're, with tough weeks like this, we're seeing a lot of folks considering to move elsewhere. And then we're going to tell folks in the Biden administration, it's going to be really hard to bring them back. So let's keep them here. Let's move forward. It's important to negotiate and see what we can do to have a path forward. But we need to have those conversations and those legislative actions happen pretty soon. Otherwise, it's going to be too late.
Ron, always great information. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.